Why do some people seem to have more spiritual experiences than others? I get this question a lot in my coaching practice because a lot of people who work with me are also looking at their spiritual life, or they contact me specifically to work on their spiritual life. And one of the things that people will tell me is that, there's my dog in the background. One of the things that they'll tell me is that they've done so much deep personal work and they don't understand why they don't have more spiritual encounters or more spiritual experiences, like my dog right here, who seems to be in a state of ecstasy. Well, there's a few things we need to consider when we answer the question, why aren't you having more spiritual experiences? The first is to clarify what you mean by spiritual experience, because too often people assume that too narrow a range of experiences qualify as spiritual experiences. So, for example, in the book Spiritual Experience, which is out now, or you can pre-order now, I talk about 7 different types of spiritual experience. And usually when I ask someone to tell me what they think a spiritual experience should be, they're actually only considering 1 or 2 of the 7 types. So this is the first issue. If you're asking this question, is your field of view wide enough? The second thing to consider is that your understanding of spiritual experience is also shaped by your culture and your context and your upbringing. So if you've grown up in an environment such as in an indigenous community where talking about the spirit world is normal, experiencing the spirit world is normal, meeting people who have encountered the spirit world is normal, we do tend to find that a cultural sense of permission or expectation predisposes people to more of the same. Not 100%, not always, but generally. Similarly, we might say that typically more Christians have experiences of Jesus than non-Christians or people who've never heard of Jesus. Well, is that a coincidence? Is that just belief or psychology making up an experience? I don't think it's just belief or psychology or wishful thinking, but I do think that the thought form precedes the capacity in many cases. Not always. There are many stories of people who don't believe in spirits, and I write about a story like this in my book, Spiritual Experience. And I talk about a time when my dad, super rational materialist, actually saw his deceased father. And frankly, had never believed for a second that something like that could have been possible. Similarly, we hear stories of people who have had encounters of Jesus who didn't even know Jesus existed, what Jesus is, was, or anything of the sort. So of course we can have experiences beyond our culture, beyond our expectation. But generally speaking, what you're paying attention to will shape what you see. What you're paying attention to, again, it's shaped by your culture, by your history of experience, and maybe just by some assumptions you've made. But there's another piece to this, which is that I think that we have often been afraid in the modern West to admit that some people just have an aptitude for spiritual experience, while other people have less. We know in the field of psychology that there is such a thing as a dissociation scale. So some of us kind of become absorbed in what we are watching and disconnect from our life more easily. Some of us kind of lose a connection with our bodies more easily than others. There's another scale called the absorptive scale, and I'm actually already giving you kind of examples of both scales. So there's different ways that people relate to reality. Some of us have a firm hold, and some of us fly off a little more easily. Some of us have expansive, immersive tendencies, and some of us are more analytic and more arm's length in the way that we engage things in the world. Well, those neurological predispositions absolutely play a role in our capacity. But more than that, if we were even just to consider the soul itself, or personality if you're more comfortable with that, I would say that most of us assume that we're all physically different, taller, shorter, eye color, predisposition for cancer or heart disease, and so on. Most of us understand that we're not all emotionally the same. Some people are emotionally intelligent. Some people need to take a class. Some of us are highly reactive, and some of us are mellow and calm. And of course, we've studied IQ and intellectual differences forever. So it's curious to me that we expect spiritual experience and spiritual intelligence to be somehow unlike every other aspect of our life. I don't think it is. I think some of us can be kind of a Michael Jordan of spirituality, and some of us can be, well, let's just say something like me trying to play the piano with both hands. Doesn't go so well. And yeah, we all have some capacity. We all have some access to that world. I can certainly play a tune with one hand and sometimes even sound pretty good. I'm just not going to be winning any awards or performing any concerts anytime soon. And this is why spiritual community is an important part of our life, spiritual practice is an important part of our lives, and so is the study of spiritual teachings, philosophies, and traditions, because in the end, no one person has access to this whole world. All we have access is to the fullness of ourselves. And when we pursue that fullness and share it with others, then together we all become more connected and more whole. In fact, we experienced a fuller fullness together.